Financial Insider Weekly. I'm your host, Michael Gray, CPA. My guest today is David Beck, and David is a certified financial planner, and his practice focuses on helping families plan for financing college educations. He has his own financial planning company, which is called Bay Area Planners. He came to the United States from England in 1982. Doesn't seem that long ago, does it? Amazing how time goes. Anyway, he worked in product management for electronic component manufacturers, including Tyco, and he saw the youth culture at high-tech companies and decided that wasn't where he wanted to be long-term, so he started a second career in financial planning. David graduated in 2006 from the financial planning program at UC Santa Cruz Extension, and in November 2006, when trying to help his niece with financing issues for her college education, he decided to focus on that area, and it developed into his full-time business. And he says that he's found helping people in this area to be very rewarding, I imagine. David, thanks for joining me today. It's a pleasure having you. Now today we're going to be talking about how a family plans to finance a college education and applying for financial aid. And as we get started on this, we're just going to hit some highlights here, and there are people like David that can help you with further guidance. So David, please update us on how things have been going in the world of higher education.
I will, but first I must say that I really did a bad job for my niece.
Oh,
Well,
yeah, but it's a learning experience.
Yes, at that point I knew nothing about it. So it was the situation that...
So you're apologizing to your niece now, is that the deal?
After all these years, she graduated and is out of college now.
Well, thank goodness for that.
So where are we standing now with regard to higher education? Yes, so a lot of higher education is kind of driven by the public colleges, and thankfully the financing situation of public colleges has got a little bit easier this last year or so. So we had a really bad time after the Great Recession. The states pulled back a lot of money, and what that drives, that also kind of drives the private colleges, in that if the public colleges are offering less, that means the private colleges can also offer less in order to to still be competitive with them. So thankfully, public institution financing is coming back round. Although, when you look at places like UC Berkeley, what they've done to achieve that is by admitting more out-of-state and international students. In fact, at Berkeley, I think it's like 25% of freshmen this past year were out-of-state or international students. The thing that's being driven by the Obama administration right now is completing college as opposed to getting people to go to college. So for many years, especially at community colleges, the idea was that to get as many people into the college system as possible. That doesn't always work very well. When you look at the dropouts, especially from community colleges, it really puts the graduation rates in a very poor light. So now there's an increasing idea that what we need to do is to get these people through college and get them a degree, as opposed to just try and get as many people into college as possible.
Okay.
And then lastly, I know every year when I go through the statistics for individual colleges, I see that the tuition costs are going up. And when we're talking about private colleges with $40,000 a year tuitions,
Ouch.
every year you can see it go up, $2,000 plus or minus, just like clockwork.
Wow. So there have been any other particular developments in the for-profit college area that you wanted to talk about today, or?
For-profit colleges, for-profit colleges, as the word indicates, want to make a profit. How do they make a profit? They do want to get as many students into those colleges as possible. And where does the money come from? With for-profit colleges, a lot of it comes from the government in terms of federal aid. So federal aid, and because the federal aid is limited, then it comes from student loans. So typically private colleges are addressing a lot of lower income students, a lot of veterans especially. Private colleges market themselves to veterans. So what that leads to is they soak up a lot of federal dollars, and sometimes their graduation rates are low, and some people question the value of the education.
We've actually seen some go away recently.
Right, there's
the group that includes Heald. I mean, Heald's been.
Right.
I mean, it's over 100 years old, I think. And
Yeah, Corinthian colleges.
yeah.
So these private colleges, had their boom years, maybe about 2006, 2007. Perhaps they purchased other colleges to build up these large organizations. But the federal government, the Obama administration's been, taking a closer look at them, and maybe pulling back a little bit on the aid. And virtually as soon as that happened, seems that Corinthian got themselves into a trouble.
Right. So kind of sad because there are students that were
Yes, yeah.
had programs in process, and now the doors are closed. Wow. Okay. So, folks, just to give you a reference point, since we're talking that particular thing that's in the news now, it's October 21st, 2014 today, as we are speaking.
So yes, October is the time, a little bit early for high school juniors to be doing too much, except concentrating on their very heavy workload, studies.
By the time that they see this, which will probably been a couple of months, and they will be more in the mindset of applying for financial aid. So.
But for seniors, seniors should have already picked their colleges, put in applications to many of them. Maybe even they are beginning for the private colleges that use the CSS profile. They may already be beginning to look at financial aid applications.
Yes, okay.
And by the time people view this, if it's like December or even January, yes, that is the time for financial aid applications.
Right. So, has there been other regulatory changes? What's the government doing to improve higher education?
They're just like nibbling around the edges, I would say. The big thing is the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act of 1965. But that is one of those really big issues like tax reform that is out there, but nobody wants to touch it just at the moment.
Right. So we're in October. We're right in front of election time.
Yeah.
And Congress's mind is not on taxes right now.
No.
It's on getting reelected.
No. So what has happened? Some aspects of federal aid. The big ones are the Pell Grant and the direct loans. So we've seen two different things happen there. The Pell Grants, as we went through the aftermath of the Great Recession, many more families qualified for the Pell Grant. And that meant that the expenditures on Pell Grants went way up. And that caused Congress to take a look and begin to see if they could claw that back in a way. And one way they did that was by shortening the number of period, or shortening the period over which you could get the Pell Grant. And then there's always worries about that they might reduce the amount of the Pell Grant. That's on the Pell Grant side. On the federal loan side, it used to be a fixed 6.8% interest. Now it's a variable interest. The variable interest right now is lower. All interest rates are lower right now. But at some point, they won't be. And that shift to from fixed interest rate to variable interest rate might eventually end up costing students down the line.
Yeah. Okay. So we've had economic upheaval for the last several years. Things seem to be getting a little better now, especially in Silicon Valley here. There have been calls for reduced government spending. We got a ballot measure Governor Brown's put on for a rainy day fund and so forth. Anyway, what does all this stuff mean for families that are trying to get a child into college?
I'm not so sure that those effects are the main ones. The main problem I see is that people just go into this with a terribly outdated understanding or no understanding.
Okay.
That's obviously not true of everybody, but a typical parent, if you think of it, it's been a long time since they went to college. If this is their first child going off to college, they remember it being possible to get a part-time job, wait on tables, get a summer job, maybe take out a small loan, and that was sufficient to get them through college.
Yeah.
Now, it's nothing like that. So some parents will say, well, I expect my child to work and earn their way through college. It's just not possible at the cost of college these days.
Uh-huh.
They don't realize that the system is holding the parent responsible for paying. And at the same time, the student is being bombarded by marketing materials from these colleges. So they pick the most expensive. So you've got this terrible mismatch between the student picking expensive colleges and the parents having no idea as to how much it's going to cost.
Boy. Do you think the college is still worth the expense these days?
On average, yes. So on average, it's a great deal. But that's not to say that there aren't people who just go about it badly, end up at too expensive a college, take out too much debt, and put themselves in a position where they can never pay it back. The statistics on debt, because college has got expensive really quite quickly over the last since say the turn of the century. The families that are most burdened with debt are younger families, whereas of all families, only 20% of families have college debt, some sort of college debt. For families where the main person is under 40, it's 40%. That's an incredible number to me, that 40% of families would still have student debt. And this may be 10, 15 years after they were actually at college. And there's a growing percentage of those families that have debt over $100,000.
Yeah.
$100,000, if you borrow $100,000 on student debt, unless you get into a really high-paying profession, that is a millstone around your neck.
Yeah, it's a real problem.
And we already see many younger families or many younger people going back to their parents to stay at home. In actual fact, I was at a real estate seminar where the speaker on real estate economics said that family generation where people marry and buy their first house to really start as a family unit is down because of the amount of student debt that people have.
Yeah, yeah. And as I understand it, that debt isn't cancelable in bankruptcy, is that right?
That's true, yes.
Yeah. Ouch.
So one of those other statistics about student debt is that now there are people on Social Security having their Social Security docked in order to pay their past due student loans.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So what are you advising families now about paying for college?
There's an equation, right? It's how much you can afford versus how much it's going to cost. And if you can match the two up, that's not really an issue. If you can't quite match them up, then you can increase the amount you can afford for taking out some loans, a reasonable amount of student loans. But if once you've maxed out, your own resources and a reasonable amount of student loans, that should put a limit on the cost of college. So really it comes down to college selection. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the problems is that the student goes for a higher cost college and the parents aren't being careful enough to monitor this. It needs to be a family decision as to what colleges are applied to. You can't just leave it to the student. So there has to be an understanding of how expensive this is going to be.
Now, some of these private colleges and so forth, though, they have financial aid that's available as well, right?
Right.
So some of them say that you could go, for example, maybe to Stanford, and not have to pay really any more out of pocket than you're going to Cal. Is that right? Or
true, yeah. So So there's two forms.
So maybe I should preface that. But Stanford is maybe the exception because they've got such a big endowment. I think that they could probably let their students go there without charging anything, and they would be fine.
Right. Some of these top colleges have billions of dollars in endowments, hundreds of thousands of dollars per student. But they don't actually have to give it to many families that can afford college, because those families will come anyway, pay whatever it costs.
Mm-hmm.
So what we want to, more common though, is when you get away from those very top colleges, many other colleges, they will give financial aid either based on need or merit. And the sad truth of viewers, here in the Bay Area is because of our, high incomes to pay our high mortgages, they're not going to get in many cases, the need-based aid.
Mm.
And therefore, if the only aid is going to come from the colleges, that's where this concept of college selections, selecting the right colleges to apply to, becomes so important.
Mm-hmm. So, this isn't in the questions, but anyway, where do you get information about, where students are going to be likely to be successful in getting financial help as far as the schools that they apply to?
Yeah, but when you think there's 2,000 to 3,000 colleges, it depends, which ones you include, which ones you don't. A couple of thousand colleges, many statistics on each college. Let's just take income levels. There might be like 5 different bands of income, each of them having different percentages of aid given to, more aid to the lower income, and so on and so forth. It's a massive information. So you have to go looking for databases. And 2 of the best databases around, one is called bigfuture.collegeboard.org.
Mm-hmm.
That's the College Board website.
Mm-hmm.
It's a commercial website, basically. And then there's a government website, nces.ed.gov, which is the government statistics. So between those 2, you can find many of the numbers you're looking for. But it's time-consuming to look.
Mm-hmm.
It requires effort, but hey, it's worth it. We're talking, many thousands of dollars. So it's worthwhile getting the student to sit down. And a very good tool that actually the government has promoted is something called the Net Price Calculator. Mm-hmm. So you can go onto the college website and search for the Net Price Calculator. And if it's a good calculator, if it's a good college, then that will be very helpful in giving you an estimate, an initial estimate of your likely out-of-pocket cost, and for your specific situation. So you put in the financial numbers that apply to you, and also the academic numbers, which determines the merit aid, and that will give you probably the best estimate.
Okay, so there is information that's available on many of the college websites themselves now. This is something that, our information age has made available to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, parents should be working with their children and so forth to sort of guide them in this process and talk about the dollars and cents about what's going to be involved about financing their education.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's the only aspect of selecting the colleges.
Yeah.
It has to be a good fit between the student and the college as well. I'm not saying it's not that. But there's also many cases where you can go to the right college, but if you have to drop out after a couple of years because you can no longer afford it, then what is the point of that? You end up with debt but no degree. That is probably the worst outcome of all.
Yeah, that's terrible. And I know somebody that's in that pickle right now. It's very sad. Okay. Well, why don't you look ahead a little bit? What do you think is going to be coming in the way of developments for higher education?
If we continue on our present path, then probably the biggest one is just the demographics. In this country, what we're seeing is more minority populations, becoming a bigger portion of the total,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe because of this inequality thing, we're going to have a lot more lower income students. So if we want to continue to put as many of the, the same number of students through colleges, it's going to become more of a financial strain. And that's probably going to cause some colleges, some of the weaker financial colleges, to close. Other than that, we have the online education, the promise of online education. So that would be a way of, getting over this ever-increasing tuition cost issue. People are trying that at the moment. They haven't yet got a kind of a package or a system that works. So many colleges are trying it to an extent, but nobody's really satisfied that it's really doing what they want at present.
Well, I've heard that some of the early results are that an awful lot of the students aren't finishing those programs for the online. That there's something about being in front of a real teacher that's
yeah. So I think it's getting the blend right. I think.
Yeah.
Certainly, if you're just talking about the old-fashioned go to college for 4 years, get into a smaller class with a professor and so on and so forth, but that's getting phenomenally expensive. Whereas you're perfectly right. If you just put everybody online, they don't necessarily learn anything.
So I think we just have a few minutes left here. I'm not quite sure where we are. But I think I'd like you to highlight a little bit of the process then for people that want to apply for financial aid and so forth.
Yeah.
Because we were talking a little bit about the calendar earlier. And
Right. Yeah, let's do that. So planning for college, ideally starts when the child is born and you put some money away. Okay, that would be great. Some people can do that, but of course there's lots of other calls on the money of young parents, housing, furniture, all those kind of things. So when save as much as you can, because whatever you save, the dollar you save has probably got a dollar less you're going to borrow. And you have interest working with you, building the savings, as opposed to working against you, paying off a debt. But college planning should really start in the junior year, and it should start with getting to know the system, getting to understand the system, having some idea of your ability to pay, and then beginning to select the colleges accordingly. When we get into the summer between junior and senior years, that's when the essays should be written. So any student, any high school senior student still writing those essays, they're in trouble. They procrastinated. You apply just about this time of year to the colleges. Beginning of the year, January, February, is when most of the financial aid applications will be submitted. March is when you begin to get the offers of admission back. Beginning of April is when you get the financial aid awards back. And it's only at that point that you know, A, where you might be going, and B, how much it's really going to cost. And that gives you a very small window, maybe just 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks of April, in which to figure it out, make your decision. And the decision is to be on the 1st of May.
Okay. And so in the basic document, I guess it's called a FAFSA?
The basic aid application is called the FAFSA, so pretty much all colleges want the FAFSA. In addition, some of the private colleges, a couple of hundred of the private colleges, want an additional application called the CSS profile. So the FAFSA is the easy one. The profile is, a pain.
Oh dear. Okay.
Yeah, real pain.
And one thing as a CPA, I always want to emphasize to people related to this process is this is not the time that you want to have an extension.
No, so the only number, or the starting number as it were, for all of these aid applications or figuring out what the aid package will be is something called the expected family contribution, and it comes out of the FAFSA or it comes out of the CSS profile. And really it's based on income tax numbers which are on the income tax return. So if you don't get your income tax return done, A, you don't really know what numbers to provide into the system, which means that they don't really know what to offer you. So if that's the case, your aid award is probably going to be restricted, or they may not offer you anything until those numbers are cleared up. So for people who are getting a K-1, I hear people say, oh, I can't file my taxes because I don't have a K-1. I guess you can always file them and amend them later.
Yeah. So this is one time, again, you want to get your tax return done as early as possible because you want to get that FAFSA submitted as early as possible. It's sort of a first in, first out, as I understand it.
Well, first come, first served.
First come, first served, whatever. Yeah. So, so you need to get that in early if you want to get, a favorable result, because otherwise you're going to be at the end of the line, and you may not get the results that you're hoping for. David, would you like to maybe throw out a final thought as we wind this thing up?
So I think I've tried to hit on all the main points, but just let's summarize them. So it's more expensive than, speaking to parents, it's more expensive than you think. The sooner you start into this, the better. Don't think that financial aid is going to pay for it all. On the other hand, don't think that it's not worth applying for financial aid. You never know what the future holds. Also, applying for financial aid, even if you don't get it from the government or the state, then it gives the college something to put into their calculation. Right. Use the net price calculator to give you an idea beforehand, and make sure you pay attention to this as the students selecting the colleges.
Great.
You don't want them making what could be a $250,000 decision.
Okay. David, thanks so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure having you.
My pleasure.
Folks, we hope we've given you some valuable information as a starting point, and we'll see you next time on Financial Insider Weekly.